Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Condo Solutions, 9 to 10 o'clock on WSTU. Every Monday morning, we talk about things that affect you in your condominium or your homeowners association, some of the issues that you're dealing with or some of the questions that you may have. It is a customer service type of show, a consumer service program. So you can call and ask your questions. 220-9788, 220-WSTU is the number in the studio. And we'll be happy to get your question on the air. My name is Mark Breckbill. I'm a local CPA and Community Association Manager, along with Peter Mullengarden. Peter's our attorney, and he's been practicing in this area for years and years and years and years. And now, as of with the bar allowing now certifications, he now has a specialty, I guess, as well. Is that what they call it, Peter? Is a specialty?
Yeah, specialist.
Specialist in this.
Guru.
Yeah, that's right. Any kind of thing like that. It's kind of funny. It takes them forever to do that. Yeah. But anyway, so feel free to call. Like I said, 220-9788, 220-WSTU. We do have a couple minor things that we always tell you. First of all, when you call, we need a name, but we don't need your association. We prefer not to have it because it discourages other people from listening sometimes because they think it doesn't apply to them. And then the other thing is that we're going to give you the best answer we can, but with any answer in this area, it is infected by your documents, and we don't have your documents. So we can't give you a hard and fast answer that you can go to court with. But we will do the best we can based on your interpretation of the documents, which we know can be confusing and conflicting, and also, general practices, law, and things like that. We also will generally talk a little bit broader than your problem, maybe, so that we can catch those people who maybe have a similar but not the exact same problem, and they're looking for advice as well. So just afraid to call in. So that's kind of the way the show's going, and it goes. We've been doing it for about 16 or 17 years, so we've been around here a while. Hopefully we've been a help. And we have our first caller this morning. John, go ahead. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Peter. I'm well. I
Good.
hope you guys are well, too.
Yep.
Good morning. Thank you.
I have a question on Community Development Districts, CDD.
Yeah.
Now, let me see if I can make this easy. Let's just say the community is 100 houses, but they can build up to 200 houses, so they're not fully built out. The CDD shows up on the non-ad valorem side of your taxes. And I also have a homeowners association, which doesn't involve this question. So if they build 50 more houses, does that lower the amount on the non-ad valorem side?
Yeah, Peter, you want me to go on that, or you?
You can go. You can jump on that.
All right. Yes, it does, John. Typically, it does. So for some of the listeners who aren't familiar with CDDs, what they are is almost like quasi municipalities. Is they're designed or were intended for large projects that span counties, so that you can have some consistency of regulation across state or across county boundaries. And they also kind of step in and fulfill some of the functions that a municipality might provide, like security sometimes, and some of those type of things. Usually there's additional services. And as you pointed out, John, it shows up as a tax, a real estate tax, not as association dues. There may be associations, sub-associations within the CDD, but the CDD itself, the costs associated with that show up on the tax bill, because as you add more units to the CDD, you typically are going to then have more taxpayers in effect, and depending upon what happens with costs, a lot of times that number can go down because it's being spread over a larger number of people, and that again was the idea of the CDD, is to allow you to get some economies of scale, and instead of paying taxes, some people paying taxes in one county, some paying taxes in the other county for schools, for police, and all of that. A lot of times it's all covered within the CDD. And that's the design of it.
You explained that very well, Mark. And but I've also heard that a CDD, which is kind of quasi-government, as you say, was developed by developers so that they could easily get their developments approved faster instead of the city. Because one of the things the CDD is responsible for is building the infrastructure, so the roads, the sewer, and all that good stuff. So it kind of like if the city, the P&Z, planning and zoning, was not favorable to a new development. Well, if a CDD came along and they floated a bond, they'd probably get approval quicker. Now, the bond is half of what we pay on our taxes under the non-ad valorem. The other half, of course, is for maintenance. My question is, do CDDs have reserve accounts for roads?
Typically, they do. I mean, typically, they're just like municipalities have money that they may have set aside for specific purposes. The CDDs, will also have that, but most of the time, the purpose of the CDDs is largely to cover operating expenses. A lot of they may also have some roads responsibility and things like that. Although that's kind of subject to negotiation in the CDD. Sometimes the sub associations are responsible for their own roads, so it depends on how the CDD is set up. You're right a little bit about it gives the developer a little more flexibility, only just because it's focused. But the developer is going to pay for it no matter what. With normally these things are designed to be projects that kind of are on, like I say, are large and encompass multiple counties, 2 counties at least usually, and sometimes they're more rural. So they put a burden on the local communities, and that's why the local communities go along with it. But also many times they meet their level of a community of regional impact. I forget what the term is for that, but it's basically a large community that spans multiple counties, and the counties are involved in the say on that in terms of how things are still constructed. So the individual county doesn't lose control, but it does simplify some of the other processes relative to services and things that they may have, that the developer might have to provide. Now they don't. Those are being provided by the CDD. Yeah,
the community I invested in, the CDD, they have a large clubhouse, they have a pool, so they do that. They do the common area landscaping, which is kind of significant because the main artery, the main road that goes through it, has a big swale on each side. So besides the landscaping, besides the pool and the clubhouse, there's very little other operating costs. So like I said, half of the cost in the non-ad valorem part of the CDD is for maintenance. Now the other half is the bond. They float it, they raise the money so that they can build the roads and the infrastructure. I was told that there's 2 bonds. One of them is probably about 80%. One of them is like 20%. And I was told the 20% one is defaulted. So what does that mean?
Well, it may mean that, they haven't made their payments, or that, that they have not met certain timetables for infrastructure improvements, and therefore, the bond, if it was designated for that purpose and they haven't met those, the bond is in default.
But what I mean is I'm sorry, I should have phrased that differently. What's the ramifications in that circumstance to the people that live in the community?
Well,
that happens.
I mean, I think that probably at that point, there was typically those bonds are issued, and they have some sort of they may have some sort of collateral. Probably not the clubhouse, but there probably is some sort of collateral there. And just like an HOA, though, those bonds typically you just assess people. I mean, you raise taxes. It's the same thing if Port St. Lucie, for example, goes out and levies a bond issuance, and then for whatever reason, they get stuck with it, and there's not the payment there, everybody in that district has to pay for it. The CDD has taxing rights, and so they would tax you. And then, frankly, if you don't pay, you potentially lose your house.
Well, that's a good point, but taxing is incremental over each year. If a bond fails, aren't they going to ask for their money back all at once? It's like calling a mortgage, so to say.
Well, not necessarily, because they may not have any ability to get paid. What they're going to want to do is, if it's in default, there's provisions probably in the document, in the agreement for the bonds that indicates what they're allowed to do. Most likely, that is they're allowed to assess. They're allowed to, the municipality, the CDD, is forced to levy a tax. And that could be very, very difficult for those people who, if it's a case that the community just didn't get built out, and, instead of, 5,000 residents, there's, 1,000, that's going to get real expensive.
Yeah.
So
when you say the word, excuse me, I'm sorry. When you say the word assessed, I always think of special assessment, meaning a large chunk of money at once. Are you saying assess as far as increased taxes? Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's exactly. They have taxing authority. The CDDs have taxing authority, and so what they would do is levy that tax.
So incrementally increasing instead of throwing a big bill all at once. It's usually the way these are written, these bonds, in case they default. I mean, in your experience, I know we're just generally speaking, but some of these provisions that you mentioned, they wouldn't have a balloon payment if the bond fails, right?
It depends. I mean, it depends on how the bond was structured, but they could. I mean, they can be. They could come due.
Generally, in what you've seen over the years in these bonds, if you have experience, if you don't, that's okay. But I mean, do most of them generally give you that ability to incrementally assess the taxes instead of?
I haven't seen many of those with bonds. I've only had a couple of them that I've been familiar with, that I've been involved with. They're large communities typically, and I don't know how many there are in the state of Florida, but there's probably only a handful or so, I would think.
CDs are bigger on the West Coast apparently, in the Tampa Bay area. From my research, I guess those are the biggest sections. And the one I'm talking about, it doesn't actually cross county lines; it's all in one county. And the reason I called you today was that first question, because I've been told by two different board members, not on the CDD, but on our homeowners association, that just because more people move in doesn't mean the non-ad valorem side goes down. And I didn't understand that one. That's why I called in, because that doesn't make sense. More people come in, more people pay. It should go down. But they're saying something about, well, that doesn't have nothing to do with the bond interest payment.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, it like I said before, if it depends on how efficiently that CDD is using that money. If they've wasted, first of all, if they've already put the infrastructure in for, a 5,000 or 6,000, person population, and then they've got these bond payments, it's possible that those bond payments were structured so that they got incrementally higher as certain, population increases occurred. But again, it is possible that they could go up. If there's,
I understand what you're saying. It's not static. I mean, costs go up, maintenance go up. The interest shouldn't, though. The bond is the only thing that should stay stable because it's a fixed rate. But the maintenance might go up. They might have had a problem, had to redo a vendor, the landscaper went up. But these are usually, and when we're talking about a pool, a clubhouse, and landscaping, these are kind of small increases. So generally speaking, the more people that come in should decrease the non-ad valorem. I mean, to me, that makes common sense.
Well, it would, but again, it depends on what happened and how certain things are done. For example, if that bond agreement is written with an escalation payment schedule in it, escalating payment schedule in it, so that those payments get higher as the population increases.
I see.
Those kind of things. So it's kind of like what the developer does in a project sometimes when they subsidize the initial development, right? They've put in all of the items and they're not funding reserves. because they've already put that stuff in. And then as people come in, they have to they have to pay less, and the people pay more as the community gets bigger and bigger. The people themselves overall, it stays the same in that situation because, typically the association is a certain size. It's a certain number of units. But, it can be those bonds can be staggered to kick in at different levels as they anticipate population increases. That could be, why the bonds are, maybe the bonds having problems or in default because they haven't reached the population levels and they were supposed to be assessing more or paying more.
That's an excellent point. And that's why I call you guys, because you come up with answers I didn't think of. So I got a lot of reading to do. I'll have to try to research this bond and see if there are escalating payments. But thank you again for your time. I do appreciate it. Great show.
No problem, John. Thanks for calling. Those things are kind of interesting. You don't see many of them. One of the things, Peter, that's interesting about them is, an association, HOA or a condo association, is not a 501c or 501a is really the code, but 501c organization. So
Right.
we're all familiar with 501c3s, which are primarily which are charities, educational, whatever. And then some people are familiar with 501c6s, business clubs and things, or 501c7s, which are country clubs and all that. But these are actually 501c4s, which are actually municipalities in effect, the way that they're structured. So they have some, when you're doing a really large project, they do have some real benefits to the developer because of the ability to borrow money fairly cheaply and to provide services that in effect become a real estate tax, so to speak, instead of a homeowners association dues type thing. So it's kind of interesting because they can provide services that would typically be provided by a municipality, like security is the most common, and fire. Those are the two most common ones that that get put in there. So anyway, they're kind of cool. You just haven't seen many of them. The market went south when they first, back in 2008 and 2009, when they were starting to get really popular, and then it dropped off. But
Yeah, I just don't have really much experience at all with them. So
yeah, we don't have.
That's why I let you carry the ball with that. My development days, as you've mentioned before in the air, when you said I was on the dark side, so to speak, but that was in a different jurisdiction, and I was up in Maryland, D.C. area. I just didn't. It just wasn't something that I had anything. And here I've been dealing, pretty much exclusively with association side. So
Yeah.
it's just not something that I deal with.
Well, and one of the reasons you don't see much of it here is that there's not those huge blocks of land that isn't already developed into a city. I mean, when you go down south, I mean, it's built out to the Everglades practically, and it's pretty well. For these kind of things, you've got to have usually huge tracts of land. Like I said, they usually span counties, but as John said, his doesn't. But there's there are still huge tracts of land over in.
There was a new city that was created here in Palm Beach County not too long ago. It was called the Westlake, but I'm not sure how they did it. I don't know if it was a CDD.
Yeah.
But so they're still out there, I guess.
Yeah, the most famous one probably around here, and it was before the CDDs, is Atlantis. That's down in your neck of the woods.
That's our area too.
Yeah, it's the
That's
only
a completely walled-in city.
Yeah, it's an HOA that's also a city that's completely walled in. It's unusual situations, and is where some of the law came from relative to public access for a city. So it's kind of that's been around for a while. But like I say, most of the time, most of these things are up in the Orlando area.
Yeah, I know that.
Tampa.
What's that Disney Celebration? I don't know how that was created, but I know it's like a private city, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember who. I think it might have been. They have a city, and they actually control the county up there, and the water and everything else up there. So they did it primarily through, I think, through forming their own city and taking over the county in effect. But yeah, it's some of these places like I know there's a big tract of land over in Tampa. It's probably the one John's talking about that was owned by I forget which family it is. It's right now. It's big. You'd recognize the name. They had acres and acres over there in West Tampa in that area, and they were building it down just west of the I-75 over there, and it's huge. It was a huge development, and so I could understand that because basically they didn't want to really have a city that they had to deal with. The CDD has less, has a little bit less overhead and burden than a city, so you don't have quite the, you don't have the situation where you got double taxations that or maybe make it hard to sell the units. So,
well, Wellington was created by Westinghouse at one time many years ago, Western Palm Beach County. So yeah, I guess all those big, not all those, a lot of those large privately owned areas that they develop.
Yeah, and it makes it, and it's interesting because it does make it, it makes it easier because you can have some general building codes. You can kind of control some of that a little bit through, you can have ordinances and things that allow you to, control what type of construction can go in, what can go in what areas, where there can be commercial, where there can be, especially if you're talking, and these are usually the case, you're talking about a project that's, maybe got a 40-year life. It's going to be a long build out. I kind of up here in Martin County, Knight Kiplinger has proposed a project out in Palm City, which is going to be on a significant amount of acreage, and he's doing it as kind of a little community. It's not really formally going to be a city or town, I don't think. It's just a little, but it's going to have like a community square and housing around the community square is going to be more dense and then it's going to have some acreage for some agriculture and things like that. And but I talked to them. I wondered why they weren't going CDD, and I think they'd considered it. They just hadn't decided. I don't think they decided to do it. But for them, a CDD would be a perfect alternative out there because a portion of the property is west of the urban services boundary. Portion of it is I think goes into or close to St. Lucie County. It might go into St. Lucie County. So it's kind of what these things are designed for, to kind of coordinate some of that. But right now, I think he's trying to get this all done within the county's building code. He's not even doing a PUD or anything. He's just doing it all within the county's building code, trying to keep it according to code. And but it is a long-term project, and a lot of times people do things like CDDs so that they can make sure that the project, the things that are built 20 years from now or 30 years from now are consistent with what was the design was, so that the community doesn't change from the beginning. So that's kind of where they're set up. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, we haven't seen many of them around here. It was one of my communities. I had actually talked to them one time about the possibility of doing it because of, even though they're all within Martin County, they border on some sensitive land and some things like that they wanted to control and make sure that land stayed the same, And so they were looking to be able to have a little bit more authority than just the typical county situation. They didn't want to have to, really didn't want to have to deal with the county. They wanted to be able to take over some of the security, some of the environmental maintenance, and some of those things that they, lakes, all of that. So that would have been an easier way for them to do it, but they decided not to go that route. They're harder to put into effect after the fact. They're much easier to do when you do them from the very beginning. So anyway, all right. Well, so anyway, that's CDDs. It's interesting. Good question, John. It's a topic we haven't talked about. 220-9788, 220-WSTU is the number in the studio. And you can call in, and Evan will pick it up and get your name, and we'll get you on and get your question answered and go from there. I know, and also, because we kind of got right into our caller this morning, I did mention that we do, we'll talk about a couple things here if we can think of something. And Peter's thinking of something right now. But if we can think of something, we'll talk about stuff coming up. But if we're talking about something and you've got a question that's not directly related to that because we've gone off on a tangent somewhere, feel free to interrupt us and we will get you on. If a listener's got a question and we're answering that listener's question, of course, we'll answer that question first. But otherwise, feel free to interrupt, I guess is what I'm saying. 220-9788, 220-WSTU. All right. So I gave you plenty of time to think, Peter. What are we doing now?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the warning.
Yeah, thanks for the warning. No, I know we've talked about a lot of stuff, and I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to hit some of these topics before, but at least a little before they're becoming issues for boards. I know, from some of the stuff I see other places, questions that I hear coming up and things that are taking place. It's interesting. We've talked about some of those. I think one of the things that I know is really getting kind of difficult is the electronic aspect of what's going on. And I think right now we're not quite at budget season yet, and people are still struggling getting some of their information. Their financials may have been delayed because of COVID. I know we had a lot of trouble. We work at home, so it really wasn't a problem for our people. But we do have to go out to the client some, and we have to, accumulate information, and so for us it was difficult because many of our clients the boards are older, and they may have some health issues, or they had their offices closed down, and so we weren't able to get the stuff we needed to complete our engagement sometime. In fact, our firm, we almost always, we do confirm cash. Not every CPA firm confirms cash when they do an audit, but we do. That's a policy of ours. And so typically in the past, we use confirmation forms, but unfortunately for years now, because somebody found a way to make money off those confirmation forms and the AICPA decided to get involved with it because they probably get a kickback, it's almost impossible to get confirmations without paying a lot of money. I mean, you ended up paying $10 a confirmation or some ridiculous things like that. And the client's got to pay for it, and it's stupid stuff. So what we have done in the past is that with all the electronic stuff that goes on, we will have our auditor either go into the branch where the association banks with permission of a signer on the account to be able to have the branch person log on and verify the information. Let us see what the balance was as of December 31st or whatever the year end is. And, if we've got questions about some of the checks that have cleared, we can actually just look at it that way. And then we document that in a memo. We don't have a confirmation. We have a verbal review, which is, for our standpoint, is just as good. And so that's become kind of common. Or we'll go to the association and watch them, but get us logged on, and they'll log us onto the accounts, and we'll also verify the balances that way. Now, sometimes, going to the banks for us is or talking to the branch person is a little easier because they might know of loans, because we're also trying to find out if the association borrowed any money and didn't tell anybody. So we've been doing, and that's the way we've done it. This year, I know it's been very difficult because the branches were closed. The people didn't want you coming in the office. You can't get stuff signed. And then when you get it signed for confirmations, you can't get an answer back. And so for us, that was more difficult. Now, what's happened is that the banks have made some concessions. I know on a couple of the things that we've done recently, they've sent us links. so that we could actually, of course, with the approval of the association, they've sent us links that would allow us to log on, but then that link goes away. And it just allows us to go on and look. Doesn't allow us to change anything or do anything, but it allows us to go on and look and get information. And then the link lasts for only a certain period of time, and then you can't log back on. It won't work. So that's kind of interesting that situation has changed. And so I'm kind of interested in seeing how in my profession, you've been doing things different, Peter, with with Zoom meetings and looking at board meetings and things like that. You've had to do some stuff from a technology standpoint, and we've had discussions about whether what kind of decisions boards can take via email, via Zoom, via and those kind of things. What kind of notices have to be made, and all of that. And it's funny, on my side, on the audit side, we've got certain things that we don't always have to do, but we're pretty conservative in our firm, and we like to check some things out, even on some lower level of work. So for us, we've had to find different ways to go about doing that, and still be able to get it. We could waive some of those things. For example, I'm not required to confirm cash as an auditor. Now, I think it's kind of foolish when probably 96% of all of the assets of an association are cash, to not confirm it. But there are some, and the standards don't require it. So some firms, in an effort to kind of reduce their costs, will do other procedures that don't involve them having to send confirmations and all that kind of stuff. But I know we're seeing. I just did an inventory this last Thursday, Friday. It had to be postponed from the weekend before because of the hurricane and or the storm, and then so we postponed it till Thursday and Friday. But we've changed that method of doing things, because normally in the past, the company would have their inventory, particularly at one location, but they would have their inventory all done at one time. They would have to bring outside parties in to help. They'd have to pay people, temporary people, to come in and count. And in the communities that they're in, that their businesses are in, the people that they hire from those communities, and the community itself is experiencing significant issues with hotspots and issues like that. So we were looking as auditors of trying to find a way that we could still audit and but not expose our client to significant risk. And so in that case, we're actually auditing parts of the inventory, but we're closing the inventory out each time as if we did the whole inventory, and we're testing it out and testing it, making sure it got to the general ledger and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of a weird thing, because we're really doing it completely different than the way we've done it in the past. And we're not going to know 100% whether our peer review is comfortable with that, but until afterwards. But it's tough.
No, I mean, from my perspective, and we've talked about this before, is that all of this is just new and unfortunately just not directly addressed.
Yeah.
By the statutes, by the regulations. Now there are some, just because I'm familiar with it, with the process that's going on right now, there are going to be some proposed amendments to the Condominium Act, to the Emergency Power Section, and to the Homeowner Association Act, and as well as the Cooperative Act, to address a pandemic type situation or other emergency situations that were heretofore, how do you like that little stupid word?
I like
that were prior to this, not contemplated, and in terms of operations and use of property, where now with this pandemic, having in-person meetings, not possible or certainly not recommended, in order to protect the safety and health of the people in the community and others, quite frankly. So, but none of it's really addressed. I think most practitioners in most associations, since, March, April, up to this point and continuing, are not having in-person meetings or very limited. But none of that is in the statutes. Board members can always, for years and years, can attend a board meeting remotely and vote remotely. But for membership meetings and owners attending board meetings, that's not really there. And there's no real there's no real authorization to do everything via Zoom. But look, that's what most people are doing, and I'm pretty comfortable. If there are any challenges to this, that again, I will side on the side of health and safety as opposed to someone challenging any day, at least right now. But it's difficult, especially for a very large community. Not everyone maybe has computers. So how is everyone going to have access to these to these meetings? But we're kind of muddling through, and it doesn't look like the virus is going away anytime soon. And now we're going to move into the fall and the winter, right? So the meetings are going to ramp up. I still think that is probably going to be, for many associations, the preferred method. With the Zoom participation, which I know is somewhat difficult, the Zoom meetings. Although again, technically, when you look through documents, you look through the statutes, they do have emergency notice requirements, but not so much. Now, 617 does allow participation, in meetings remotely, but 617 doesn't cover everything, and 718 doesn't expressly. It talks about people participating in meetings in person or by proxy, but so is the Zoom going to qualify as in person? Again, right now it is taking the substitution of that, right? I mean,
right.
The Zooms in person, but again, not some associations, I guess, not as technically capable, or owners don't have the. So again, it's an issue. The other issue is access to amenities. How long should they stay closed? When do they get open? What happens when the declared state of emergency ends from the governor? Right now, the authority really to keep those things closed, such authority that there is coming through the emergency powers, where you can keep things closed, arguably, during a declared state of emergency where the community is located. That state of emergency currently is running through September 8th, 7th or 8th. And that's when the current one, unless it's extended again by Governor DeSantis for the state.
And I think the president extended his or extended the federal until December 31st, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think he made it. I think he made it a law.
Now I think, although it's hard to predict, what the politicians will do. I don't think between now and September 8th, again, that this thing's going to be gone. I don't know where the numbers will be. They seem to fluctuate somewhat. But Florida still seems to be, pretty well in the grip of the virus. So I anticipate him probably extending it, but I don't know. But if he doesn't, and associations still aren't comfortable with opening up their fitness centers or their clubhouses, things like that, that'll be another challenge. That might, now we're going to be, if they want to keep them closed, they can say, well, we can pass reasonable rules and regulations. Is that reasonable? I don't know. So again, the statutes, I think, are going to change. Of course, even when they change, it's not going to, unfortunately, address everything because no one has a crystal ball. But that's not, again, that's in the works, but it certainly hasn't occurred yet, and it won't be effective until, whenever it goes.
It's interesting though, Peter, is that, personally, I'm not sure that we really need to modify anything. I mean, first of all, the chance of this happening, it's, I guess another 200 years it might happen. Maybe we'll deal with it at that time. But I think that, something of this scale, it's unlikely it happens again. but also, we do have. I think that it was good because there is enough room in the condo regulations, in particularly when you bring the division in, to kind of get some guidance. And I think most associations handled this well. Even if they handled it differently, I think they handled it well, because I think many of them handled it the way their community wanted. I think that there was, we've had some where there's been conflict because the board has taken a position different than the majority of the homeowners. And I think that's a mistake. You just because you become a board member of a condo or a HOA doesn't mean you're smarter or you're God or you know more than the people you live with, and you have rights to really step on. But I think that a lot of these places have done a pretty good job. They've looked at their people who lives there, the ages of the people who live there, the health of the people who live there, how many people are there, during the summer, how many are there during the winter. That's of course makes it a different story, because most of the oceanfront condos are 10% occupied or something, maybe less, but come in January they'll be 100% occupied. So I think that, I liked it, that I thought that there was enough flexibility. I think they're going to have to deal with some of these I think they're going to have to deal with more of this electronic stuff, because I think that the government doesn't realize, how adaptive people can be to some of this stuff. Yes, a lot of people in these associations don't have computers, or may not have computers. And I'm sure it's a lot. Most of the people I know are communicating in some form through email or whatever else. But the interesting thing is most people now have smartphones. I mean, more and more people have smartphones, and you can access a Zoom meeting with or without video on a smartphone. You can, there's so many things you can do with that smartphone that, including just, being able to hear everybody and being able to be on the conversation. And now these technologies are such that, the team meeting program with Microsoft or Zoom, they can have hundreds of people that can actually be on the call, which is kind of interesting. So, and then we've got this whole electronic voting, which we've been able to vote electronically, but nobody can figure out. There's only a handful of systems that have been approved and all of that kind of stuff. And, it amazes me that a condo association can't take a vote by email, or in terms of doing something there, and there has to have a special system for taking a vote, but we can mail out millions of ballots to people around the United States and expect they'll come back in, without a problem. So I don't know, there's got to be a way to solve some of this stuff without some of the formality. That's what I'd like to see him do, is just kind of give us more guidance, and let it be a little broader, but give us some guidance as to, how you take the process of voting by email, or, by Zoom or whatever, those kind of things. So, and I think they can do that. And then that's going to cover a wide range of situations, because now you don't have to do things in an emergency, unless it's a true emergency, like a hurricane or something where you got to secure the building. When we've got an emergency like we've got now, the thing I have a problem with this is that people, there is no need to act quickly. You just have to act correctly. You don't have to act quickly necessarily. And so there's an opportunity here now to get people involved, to ask them, what do you think, and what you should do. And so I just would like to see more of that a little bit. I still see too many boards wanting to step up and tell the community, this is what's best for you. And I don't think any of them were elected for that purpose. They're not, the president of the United States or Congress. They're not, that's not the reason. They're there to just help us manage the association, but not to tell me how to live my life. And, so I think that's the only thing I have a little bit of an issue from is I think the way things have been handled has been really good. We've just seen some associations that for whatever reason, they don't want to ask the people in their community what they think. And I think it would be a good thing because most of them would probably find out that the people in their community agree with them. but instead we've created conflict because we're telling people this is what's going to happen. You don't have any choice. I've noticed one of these things, and I'll ask you this, and we're running out of time, but I'll ask you this, Peter. Have you noticed more associations suddenly deciding to do some repairs on those facilities that there's questions about whether they should be open or not?
No.
I've seen an association that they started to do their pool repairs. That made sense because, the pool was going to be closed for a while.
Right.
They found some other things. So now they've shut down the pool for a few months. I think it's legitimate, but, I heard of another association that was going to begin renovations on their fitness room. So, trying to do some things there. So I guess it's a good time to do that. You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
No.
I guess it's a good time to do that stuff. So, that's one answer is, hey, if we've got questions about using some of this stuff, do you want to do some of the maintenance on it now? Should we just go ahead and shut it down for everybody? But because we're going to finish up the maintenance and then we won't have to shut it down another time later to do maintenance later when people could have access to it. So it probably makes some sense. But anyway, it's kind of interesting the way, the way it works. I've got to, we're running out of time here, and I'm a little bit worried because Evan's putting his mask on. He's got his Mets thing on here. He's looking a little scary here. I'm afraid I'm going to be assaulted by some crazed fan. But anyway, but he does look good. But anyway, I think that's going to be the most interesting thing that comes out of this is what associations end up doing when they going forward and what the government decides to do. I don't know that they really need to do much because I don't think we're going to have to deal with something like this, hopefully, for another 100 years or so. So it'd be good.
Hopefully not.
And we'll be gone by then. And that's the answer to reserve questions as well. We'll be dead by then. So there's no reason to deal with it. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. And Peter, as always, appreciate you being here. And I know our listeners appreciate it. We'll be back again next Monday morning from 9 to 10 o'clock. So let people know, write the number down, 220-9788, 220-WSTU. Put that down, save it so you've got it for the show because a lot of people have that number and they call in right away. So we'll be here. See you later. WSTU Digital 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.